Hello, welcome, it's Deborah at Attic Lane, and this is part 8. This is the final part of our Beginner's Guide to Junk Journaling course that has been running over the past 7 weeks. This is the last week that we're doing, and I want to talk about ephemera. So ephemera basically means any printed material, but we tend to mean vintage material, so it might be old postcards, it might be old receipts, it might be old tickets, anything old it can be. But what if you don't have access to a fair where you might pick up those things? What if you don't have easy access to a second-hand shop where you might find those things? You might find old postcards in second-hand shops, but what if you want something that's more specific to your project? The book that we've been working on for the past 7 weeks is this one here, and the theme is botanical flowers. So what if you want botanical themed ephemera? Little bits and pieces that you can add into all the little tuck spots that you've created. There's a number of ways that you can get images. Now, I had this site, Pixabay, recommended to me by somebody who does web design, and it's absolutely brilliant because it has free for commercial use and free for personal use and copyright free images that you can download and you can use in your projects. And there are thousands of images, and they are photographs and they are old adverts, and they are just a selection of what you see in front of you is what you can get on Pixabay. And I will provide a link to it underneath the video. So under the video it's got a little show more tab. You'll see maybe a couple of sentences and then it'll say show more. Click on the show more. All of the links will be on there. These images it's like a shared image site, I suppose. It's free to join. You have to register, you have to join, but then once you've joined you can go and search through all of the images and you can find whatever is appropriate for you. So there's a search tool, put in there vintage flowers or vintage botanical or vintage photos, and it will come up with a selection of images. Then you download them, print them off, and these are all little selections of images that I've found. Just spent an hour or so just having a little poke around, and I found these images. The other thing that's useful about knowing just one site to go, I mean I could blast you with about 7 or 8 places to go, but this I've found to be the best. I found the quality to be good and reliable. You can of course go to Etsy. There are some wonderful downloadable images on Etsy, but I would say before you click the buy now button, always check the commercial license. And it sounds like it's very sort of boring stuff to go and look at when your creative muse is on you, but really check it out. I've seen people spend quite a lot of money and then not be able to use the items that they have legitimately bought, but they're not available for commercial use. Now, if you just want to make journals to gift to friends or family, that's absolutely fine. They are usually absolutely fine with that. If you want to share it online, if you want to put pictures on the internet, you have to check the license. Just make sure that you can do that. They might require you to buy a license. They might simply require that you give them the credit, and that's fair enough. A link back to wherever you got the material. But always check that license, because sometimes if you got to a point where you were making journals and you were enjoying making journals and you wanted to sell them, if you don't comply with the license agreements, then you'll be stealing somebody else's copyright. So these images are copyright free. They're also free for commercial use. On this site, all they ask is that if you download some images, say you download 3 or 4 from the same artist, they say buy them a cup of coffee. And there are many artists on there. There are too many for me to I mean, there are just hundreds of people on there. Go and have a look and see how you get on with that one website. Now, the reason that I'm not blitzing you with loads and loads of websites is because you know what happens. You start out looking for, let's say, digital flowers or vintage flower ephemera, and you poke around the internet and you have a little look on YouTube, and 4 hours later you've learned how to milk a Mongolian yak. This way it keeps the focus. I have to always remind myself, stay focused, sometimes I do myself a little list of 2 or 3 things that I have to do online to make sure I don't disappear off into the ether exploring things that I really don't need to know about. So that's my first tip for gathering your ephemera. Of course, once you've got these and you've printed them out, you might want to say, well, what would I do with the reverse of that? You can leave it blank, you can leave it white. I print off onto paper that is, it's halfway between paper and halfway between card, and it's 160 grams per square metre. And it's absolutely great. It's got a nice smooth finish and it's good for printing. You can leave them blank, so you can write little messages on them, or you can glue them onto the front. This is another project I'm doing. I'm doing about 6 projects at the moment. So you can glue them onto the front of a little notepad. If you do want something to go on the back of your images, then cut something to size. Obviously this isn't to size. I don't think I have. Well, that might be. Oh, there's one that I did earlier. If you have some stencils and some inks, do some stenciling on the back of the white. If you don't want to stencil or you don't have that sort of equipment, take a book page, put it on the reverse and cut it down to size, and then you've got interest on both sides. It depends how you want to use it. It depends if you want to write on it, if you want to write on a clean background, or if you want to be able to maybe turn it into a tag and take it out of a pocket and see something on the reverse of it. What I'm moving into more and more is making my own ephemera. These are two, well, this one is an ATC, this is a little bit smaller, but this is the original, and this is a piece of craft card which I stamped on the, well, first of all I inked it up with some vintage photo ink around the edges and a little bit of antique linen in the centre to lighten it. Then I took some stamps and I used potting soil archival ink to stamp the flower image and the butterfly images. I used one of the little word sections that we made in one of our earlier videos, quite early on, where we took a printed word, just printed a word off on the printer, went round the outside of that with some brown pen and then popped it onto a piece of printed paper from one of our books. And then this is something I've been experimenting with. These little scraps are pieces of tissue paper, and I've been experimenting with taking some of the images that I've got from Pixabay, printing them onto tissue paper like this, and then ripping around the outside of it and using some glue just to stick that in place. If you don't want to go to, this is a bit of a faff, if you don't want to do this, then you can use a napkin. If you've got a napkin that's got some, you know, maybe some flowers or something on it, or a design that you like, then just rip around the image and just glue it onto your ATC. Having done that, I thought, well, that's nice, I like that. I'm gonna photocopy that, I'm gonna scan that, and I'm gonna store it on my computer as to remind me of what I did. And so I stored it, I printed it, I didn't check my settings, it came out a different colour, but I thought, oh okay, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, why am I using that as a reminder? Why don't I just print it out again from my scan, which is where the colour went a bit strange, and it also went a bit smaller. Like, I should have checked my settings before I did that. But then I thought, okay, I really like that, and so I put on a single word. I didn't bother backing it with the paper as we had before. So I put on a single word, I went around that word with my brown pen, and then I added some beautiful gold rose gilding. So I did some little stamps of my butterflies, and then I put beautiful embossing powder on those. So I did that with 2 or 3, just so that I got double bubble. So I went to a lot of work to do the first bit, to do the tissue paper and add that, but then I've got some beautiful sets of ATCs that I can pop into journals. I think I probably need to back these. I thought these looked a bit scruffier than they did, but actually the reverse of those is pretty good. So that's a way that you can make, store and then print your own ephemera. The other thing that I've been experimenting with on the scanning and photocopying is scanning images of flowers directly onto tissue paper. The way to do the tissue paper, by the way, is to use repositionable spray on the back of some tissue paper, cover a piece of A4 paper with it, make sure that there's no sticky around, could gum up your printer, and then print off as you normally would onto the tissue paper. Immediately gently remove the tissue paper from the A4 standard photocopier page, and then you end up with these. I've got quite a few of these now. They sort of curl up at the edges, but that's absolutely fine because you can still use them. And I've got some here where I went outside down our little lane, and I picked some grasses, and I picked some leaves and some little daisies that we had growing in a pot in our garden, and one of these, I don't know what it is, but this plant, it's a weedy thing. And I put them directly on the scanning bed of my printer, and I scanned them onto tissue paper, and this is what I've got. And I think this is terrific. So what I've done, my favourite one, has got a sort of an autumn theme because it has this grass. It looks like it could be wheat from a harvest. And I've done a similar thing to what I did with my originals of my first ATCs. So I used a word stamp, and I just stamped my word on the back in brown, on sort of the first layer of this in brown ink, and I added some butterflies and a big butterfly, and then I took my tissue paper, my grassy tissue paper, and I put it over that. So that is an actual image that is grass, one of the grasses, wild grasses from outside in our lane. And I think that's really effective. You might have some more beautiful plants. I just used weeds. But I did get some nice effects. So this is one with I put on the leaf, and then I added another of the grasses. And again, it's done the same way, you know, printing on the, stamping on the background with the butterflies and the words. And this is one I made using this, this thing. I think it might be elderflower. Might be elderflower. And again, stuck it on with a couple of bits of lavender that came from our garden that I scanned and printed out as well. So I've got a few of these, and I'm still experimenting with it, but I'm quite happy with how that turned out. This got a bit busy. I put a bit too much on that. But to make your own ephemera, if you're doing something botanical, this is a fun way to experiment with it. So that's something else that you can do. I'm working at the moment, I'm working on a Scottish journal, and I wanted to make my own images. I wanted to take some of the photographs that I'd taken when I was on holiday in Scotland, and I wanted to manipulate them a little bit in Photoshop. I'm not very good at Photoshop, and I'm not going to tell you in detail what I did. It was pretty simple stuff, because that's my level. But for example, here's a photograph I took of a Highland cow, and this is how I've turned it into my own ephemera. So I've cropped the picture quite tightly, I've turned it into a sepia tone, I've added a bit of text down the side to tell me that this is a Highland cattle, and I've got the Gaelic for Highland cattle, and then the Scots Hieland coo, which is what I grew up calling them, as the Hieland coo. This one is actually called Hamish, if you needed to know that. But I've got a whole load of other photographs here, and some that aren't on this sheet, but this is to give you an idea of where I started from and where you can take this. And I've got some more pictures where this is the journal that I'm working on at the moment, and I wanted to make this journal has got a Scottish theme, but I don't want it to be all haggis and bagpipes. I want it to be a bit more meaningful than that. So I've used my own images from my holiday, and I've manipulated these photographs in Photoshop. I've made them sepia toned. I found that you can add some sort of scratches, and then I've added a little border. So these look as if these are postcards that I might have picked up on my travels. In fact, this was the place that we rented somewhere to stay on our holiday, and we stayed on the side of a loch, and it was just stunningly beautiful. So these are the sorts of things that if you have photographs that have special memories for you and you'd like to include them in your journaling, this is a way to do it. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to suggest that you consider for your own images, for your own ephemera. And then it means that when you have a journal like this, you have lots of things that you can pop into these pockets that you have made, that are personal to you, that make your journal even more unique than it already was. You've got more places that you can write on. you've got lots of things that complement the design of your journal, and it just, I think it makes it a little bit more special. So that is the end of our junk journaling course. It's been aimed at card makers because that's where I know a lot of you have subscribed from the card kits. And it's also aimed at beginners in junk journaling, but assuming that you don't have a whole load of equipment as well. And this has been made from a couple of old books, 3 old books, a cereal box, and the inside bag from the cereal box. And I hope that you found some inspiration. I hope that you will make your own journals, and I hope you let me know how you get on. Thank you very much for joining me for this series. If you've enjoyed it, leave me a comment, let me know, and I will see you again soon, I hope, with our next project. And in the meantime, take care.